this next one is another little sort of mind-blowing one. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. So Luke 23 verse 44, it was now about noon and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. I looked it up.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible.
Today is day 307, covering Luke 23 and 24.
So we haven't done a rock-off in a long time. This time, literally, as you may know watching this, we record a bunch of these in a chunk. This is our third one of the evening. It becomes a lot more intense the more you do them, because suddenly we're playing mind games with each other. So either way, shall we?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Ah, nice. What sucks about that is I was going to go scissors because I was like, he knows I went rock last. So he might, yeah, anyway, I thought you were going to go paper.
I don't know what I was thinking, mate. I went to go get my other hat and put it back on. I was like, no, last time I wore that hat, I lost. So I'm going to keep this hat on. And I do have one spare hat sitting down here that if I lose this one, I could throw it and put a third hat on. But
Love that. Love that. Yeah.
I kind of wish you won, though, because this one, and I mentioned it off air, we hadn't done rock-offs in so long because it just happened to be we weren't making the same notes, which is always cool. But this time when I was making my notes, I had it highlighted or written, or like underlined in my Bible, but I wasn't going to mention it. Then I saw that Bevan had mentioned it. I was like, oh, I kind of have to talk about it now. So I feel like I have to. But 23 verse 2, it specifies, talking about Jesus, he opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king. And I was like, that's just a lie, isn't it? Because I better plug my battery. Oh, that would be awkward, wouldn't it, if my laptop died? And it's like, no, he was questioned about this previously, and he actively said, what is Caesar's, whose face is on that? All right, give it to Caesar. He made money appear in the mouth of a fish to pay taxes, like all this stuff, but they're just straight out lying now because they can't trip him up.
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? It's really awful. And yeah, when you sort of think about what the Pharisees and Sadducees did, that's even like the tip of the iceberg, right? They're lying, deceiving, but they're even like gloating and sort of saying like, oh, look how sinful he is, doing miracles on the Sabbath. Like the extent that they hate this guy is just very toxic.
Yeah, the way that we've pointed out a few times now, the stuff he was saying without unlawfully, but pissing them off to the point where they are humiliated, embarrassed. It probably is affecting their income because people are following Jesus now and like all this kind of thing.
Yep.
No wonder they want him dead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I think I'm up next with 23:9.
I was just very quickly going to say that the what you just said, so that links to 23:22. He says, what crime has this man committed? I found in him no grounds for the death penalty. I'll have him punished and release him, right? So, as you say, they're having to make stuff up because he's innocent and they know it. And, it's terrible. Sorry, I just add that in because it linked nicely.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it. So I think this is what I was trying to think of the other day when I was chatting and I ended up sort of tripping over my words a little bit. But they plied Jesus with many questions, but Jesus gave them no answer, is how it's recorded here, 23 verse 9, where they're questioning him before Pilate and Herod. And I had a note on here, it doesn't say from when, but it says being unrepentant equals cutting off the voice of God. And I wonder whether there's an element of Jesus has answered so many questions, but they're just so unrepentant, they're so unwilling to listen to the truth that eventually it just cuts off the voice of God from your life. If you stop listening to God, eventually you won't be able to hear him. He won't stop talking, but you won't be able to hear him.
I love that, dude. That's really good. That's a really interesting point. Okay, go for it as well. You're still up.
A fairly simple one here, 23, verse 39 to 43. This is talking about while Jesus was on the cross dying, the two criminals, which we've mentioned before, but this is the first account of it saying that one of the criminals heaps insults on him and the other criminal rebukes him, saying, don't you fear God? We're here under the same sentence. This man's done nothing wrong. And Jesus says, remember me Oh, then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly I tell you, today you'll be with me in paradise.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the Bart Simpson, deathbed conversion. But also so many people are like, oh, if you haven't been baptized, then you can't be in heaven, whatever. And it's like, that's not true. Jesus would rather you be baptized, because the whole concept of being, dead and born again.
Right.
But you don't need to be baptized in order to be saved.
Yeah. That's exactly what I put as well. It's a clear example of how it is grace and grace alone that saves us. Because there's nothing else that this man did other than believing, and Jesus, through grace, saves him right then and there. There's no works whatsoever. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. So then this next one is another little sort of mind-blowing one. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. So Luke 23, verse 44, it was now about noon and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. I looked it up. So, using modeling, astronomers can actually look at how the planets and everything have interacted and whatever. And they've identified that on the first Friday, which was the 3rd of April in AD 33, based on a calculation, there was a partial eclipse of the moon, which would have been able to be seen in Jerusalem on that date. And two scientists called Humphreys and Waddington say that the eclipse appeared to be blood red and followed a dust storm that darkened the sun, just as the apostles said in the Gospels. And another thing that supports that it would have happened on a Friday is later on in Luke 23, verse 54, it says it was preparation day and the Sabbath was about to begin.
Yeah.
So it links perfectly. And then the only other thing I've added, I'm not sure why I added this now, but 3 in Hebrew is shalosh or shalashah, which means harmony, new life, and completeness. So the fact that it happened on the 3rd AD 33, now in fairness, calendars and stuff, but to me that links to the Trinity, harmony, completeness, new life, all that cool stuff.
Bro, that's good, but it's so much better than good.
It's God's plan, his perfect plan.
That's amazing, fella. Have you got anything else? Because I feel like you just keep on going, mate. You're on one.
So the next one is Luke 24, verse 11 and 12. They did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away wondering. So the only one that questioned whether it might be true was Peter. And Jesus had sort of given Peter the fact that Peter was called the Rock, right? And said that he would be the foundation of the church. So I just think that's interesting. When no one else would believe the women, and Jesus has entrusted, God has entrusted the women to be the ones that bring this enormous news. The person who's going to raise the church is the only one who believed in it at that point. So think how tender how fragile Christianity was in that moment, really. And yet Peter came through at the time that was needed.
Yeah.
So just love that as well.
Yeah, bro. Fantastic again, man.
Oh, any last points from you, Mr. Peters?
Yeah, go on then. So a few years back, Jeff Price in Woodstock did a fantastic sort of preach on the road to Emmaus, which is verses 13 sort of through to about 35, basically, and the significance of that and how Jesus first appeared to the women. And actually in that time, that was so countercultural. And then it actually, the significance of it being 3 days since all this took place, because that's the amount of time that they said back then it took for a soul to enter the next realm or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what that was. So if it was any time sooner, they could have been like, oh, but his soul hadn't fully left, something. And then just the hope that comes out the back of it, like we didn't find his body, like, there's a vision of angels who said he was alive. There is hope through this whole thing. And then what I love about it is when actually Jesus meets with them and chats with them on the road, like the Jesus poker face going on right there. Must be so cool. Obviously they didn't recognize Jesus. He had a different physical appearance at that stage. But yeah, bro, that whole end of Luke is so cool.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. Cool. Okay, nice. So yeah, that's the book of Luke. Tomorrow we're going to be diving into John chapters 1 and 2. Thanks for joining us. Please like, share, subscribe. We love you. See you tomorrow, hopefully.